The storm over Midgard broke like a roar from the heavens, wind howling through the fjords as lightning split the night. Somewhere beneath that wrath of nature, a boy ran through the forest, bare feet bleeding against the rocks, his breath ragged, heart burning like a forge. His name was Eirik, the son of no one. At least that's what he had always been told. Behind him, the light of torches danced between the trees. Voices shouted his name, not with affection, but with fury. The hunters of Asgard had found him. Eric of the North, by order of the All-Father's decree, yield yourself. He stumbled, pain flaring in his ankle, and hid behind an ancient pine. Rain dripped from his hair as he pressed his hand against the mud, whispering words he did not understand, words that came to him like instinct. The mud shimmered faintly beneath his palm, twisting, forming shapes that slithered away like living shadows. Then silence. He held his breath. The hunters passed, armored figures gleaming faintly in the stormlight. One carried a hammer etched with runes, a smaller echo of Mjolnir. Another wore a wolf pelt soaked in rain. Their voices echoed through the trees. They said the boy's eyes burned green like the trickster's. Blasphemy, Loki is dead. Dead men don't leave sons. Eric clenched his teeth. His eyes indeed burned green when anger rose. He had seen it in the river's reflection. The same cursed light people whispered about in fear. He had grown up in a fishing village on the northern coast, a quiet orphan taken in by a widow named Brynja. But strange things followed him, fires that lit without flint, whispers in dreams, visions of golden halls and serpents coiled around the world. And then, last night, he had touched a dying man's hand and watched the man's wounds knit together like time reversing. That was when they had called him Spawn of Loki. A crack of thunder shook the forest. When Eric looked up, he saw a shadow move between the trees, tall, lean, cloaked in emerald flame. For an instant, the rain seemed to stop falling around it. A voice smooth as silk and sharp as frost whispered in his ear. "Run, my son." Eric froze. Who? Who are you?" "You already know. You feel it in your blood." The voice faded with the storm, but its echo lingered in his bones when he rose again. Strength filled him, a burning energy that was both terrifying and exhilarating. He turned, raised his hands, and the shadows moved at his command. The ground itself twisted, roots rising like serpents, entangling the nearest hunters. They screamed as the forest came alive, dragging them down into the earth. When it was over, Eric fell to his knees, gasping. His hands trembled. The mud beneath him steamed with dark magic. He did not understand it, only that he could feel something vast within him, as though his soul were tethered to a storm that never ended by dawn. He had reached the cliffs overlooking the sea. The village below was burning. The widow's house, the only home he had ever known, was gone. He sank to the ground, heart hollow. The storm had passed, but a strange stillness clung to the air, the smell of ash, of endings. Eric. He turned sharply. A figure stood upon the rocks, a woman in a black cloak, her hair white as snow, eyes pale like mist. She moved like someone both alive and not. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am called Skadi," she said softly. "Once a goddess of the hunt. Now, little more than a ghost." She studied him. "You are his son." Eric hesitated. "Whose son?" Her gaze sharpened. "You bear his mark. Loki Laufeyson, the trickster, the father of lies, the one who died chained in his own flame." "That's not possible." His voice shook. "Loki was a god. I'm just—" "A shadow of him," she said, "born from his chaos, hidden in Midgard by those who feared what you would become." The wind howled through the cliffs. Eric's pulse pounded in his ears. "Why are they hunting me?" he asked. "Because your blood carries his magic," Skadi answered, "and because prophecy speaks of a son who will finish what Loki began." He took a step back. "I don't want this. Want it or not, it is yours." She reached into her cloak and drew out a shard of obsidian carved with runes. "This belonged to your father. It will show you what you need to see."
When Eirik touched it, visions erupted before him, flashes of Loki bound in chains beneath the earth, venom dripping upon his face, of Thor weeping beside his brother's corpse, of the world aflame during Ragnarok. Then, silence, and the faint cry of a child. He saw himself. He dropped the shard, trembling. Scotty's voice was almost kind. The blood of trickery is not a curse, boy. It is a weapon. Learn to wield it, or it will wield you. He looked up at her. What do I do now? She turned toward the horizon. Go east, beyond the ruins of Asgard. There lies a serpent older than gods, waiting for its brother's heir. It will tell you the truth of your lineage. He frowned. A serpent? She smiled faintly. Jormungandr. The world serpent. The first of Loki's children. The name coiled in his mind like a whisper. Scotty stepped back, her form dissolving like mist in sunlight. Go, Eirik of Loki. The gods will not rest until you are ashes. But if you survive, perhaps the world will not end in fire again. Eirik stood on the cliff long after she vanished. The sea below was endless, gray and cold. He clenched his fists. Father, he whispered. If you can hear me, tell me what to do. Only the wind answered. Yet for the first time, he felt something stir inside him, not fear, but purpose. He looked toward the east, where the sky blushed faintly with dawn. Somewhere beyond that horizon waited the truth. He set his jaw, turned his back on the ruins of his old life, and began to walk, and behind him, where his footprints pressed into the mud, the earth smoked faintly, like the touch of a god returning to the world.
The dawn rose pale and silver across the northern fjords, a cold light spilling over jagged rocks and frozen streams. Eric walked alone, the wind whipping against him, biting at his cloak and flesh alike. Each step seemed to echo with destiny, each gust a whisper of the fate he could not yet grasp. The mountains loomed ahead, dark and jagged, a foreboding promise of the unknown. Even as he traveled, the memory of Jormungandr's eyes haunted him. Golden, infinite, aware beyond comprehension, the voice of the serpent echoed in his mind. Learn, survive, choose. Eric shivered and drew his cloak tighter, pressing forward through forests heavy with frost. Snow blanketed the ground, muffling the sound of his footsteps but not the rhythm of his racing heart. The shadows he had commanded in the forest of Midgard still lingered in his hands, flickering faintly in the dim light, reminders of the power that lay, dormant and dangerous, within him. You are not yet ready, he whispered to himself, but I will become ready. I have to. Hours, or was it days, passed as he traversed the barren wilderness. The sky shifted above him, auroras flickering like fingers of flame across the heavens. At night he slept beneath skeletal trees, dreams haunted by Loki's voice, twisting riddles that promised revelation and peril in equal measure. One evening, near a frozen river that reflected the auroras like fractured glass, the air shifted. A low hum vibrated through the earth, carrying a resonance that made the hair on his arms rise. Eric froze. The ground trembled beneath him. Something was coming. From beneath the ice, a subtle ripple spread. Then another, and the water parted as if an unseen hand was drawing aside a curtain. He saw the first glimmer of golden eyes, vast and calculating, rising from the depths. Child of my brother, a voice rumbled, shaking the stones beneath his feet. Why have you come? Eric fell to his knees, awed and terrified. I don't know. I was told to find you. By whom? A woman, Scotty. She said you would guide me. The serpent's immense head tilted, water cascading from its jaw. Its scales glimmered like dark glass. So the trickster sends his spawn, and yet, you are not yet broken. Not fully. That is promising. Broken? Eric whispered, trembling. I don't even know what I am supposed to be. You are his son, the serpent rumbled. That is enough. Eric swallowed, feeling a strange warmth wash over him. Yet when the serpent's gaze turned cold, he shivered. Beware, child. The gods hunt you. They see in you the echo of their greatest enemy. They will not forgive your ignorance. And there are others, older, patient no longer, watching you even now. His pulse quickened. Then what am I to do? Learn. Survive. Choose. Eric tried to comprehend the weight of the creature before him, its presence spanning centuries and worlds. The serpent continued, "You carry the blood of trickery, but it is also the blood of cunning, wit, and survival. If you allow it to bloom, if you embrace the shadow without succumbing to it entirely, you may shape the world in ways even the gods cannot foresee." Eric's hands trembled. "I don't know if I want that power. Power is not wanted. It is inherited. You cannot escape it. You may only choose how it manifests." The fjord roiled beneath the surface. Faint golden light swirled and twisted. The serpent's presence reached through water, earth, and stone. Into him, into his bones. A pulse, ancient and alive, vibrated through his entire being. "I will teach you," the serpent said, "if you are willing. But the path is perilous. Lies and betrayal are not your only enemies. Sometimes truth will wound deeper than any blade."
Beyond the gate, the air turned bitter, as if the cold itself were alive. Mist coiled around him, whispering secrets he could almost understand. Shapes shifted in the fog, forms half seen, watching, waiting. He could sense the presence of the dead, those claimed by Hel, the ruler of the underworld. "Welcome, son of the trickster," a voice hissed. Irik's eyes darted to the shadows. From the mist emerged a figure, tall, thin, and pale, her eyes black as abyssal pools. It was Hel, and she smiled, though the gesture was devoid of warmth. "You've come far," she said, her voice echoing in the hollow space. "Few live long enough to cross the threshold of Nibelheim. Fewer still bear the blood of Loki." Eirik straightened. "I am here to understand. To know what I am." Hel tilted her head, considering. "Power. Destiny. It is all a game, child. And you are a player born of chaos. But even chaos can be tempered, shaped. Or destroyed." "Why me?" Eirik asked. "Why am I the one?" "Because you are the son of the one who dared defy the gods," she replied. "You carry the consequences of his choices in your veins. And the world waits to see what you will become." The ruins of Asgard stretched before him like a corpse frozen in twilight. Once golden halls now lay shattered, pillars leaning like broken bones, banners of the old gods fluttering tattered in the wind. Eirik stood at the edge of the great hall, the wind tugging at his cloak, carrying the faint scent of brimstone and ash. Every step into the fallen city reminded him of stories whispered in the fjords, tales of Ragnarok, of fire and frost, of gods who died and those who survived only to mourn. The air felt heavy, like it remembered the battles that had torn the heavens apart. "So this is what remains," he murmured, awe and unease curling together in his chest. He walked cautiously across the shattered cobblestones. Senses alert. Shadows flickered along the broken walls, some natural, others unnaturally still, as though holding their breath. The power inside him stirred, responding to the presence of ancient divinity. Even in decay, at the center of the ruins, a faint glow emerged. It was not fire, not sunlight, but something in between, a pulsing golden light that called to him, compelling yet terrifying. As Eirik approached, he saw a figure, tall and broad-shouldered, wielding a hammer that seemed to hum with latent energy. Thor, the god of thunder, had survived Ragnarok, scars lining his body and grief etched into his face. His eyes, a storm of fury and sorrow, fixed on the boy. "You," Thor said. Voice deep, rolling like distant thunder. "The son of Loki." Eirik froze, the wind catching his words. I did not seek conflict." Thor's gaze narrowed. "Conflict finds you. Always it will. Your father's legacy follows you like a shadow, and I will not forget it." Eirik took a trembling step forward. "I am not him. I am myself." "You are a reflection," Thor replied. "A mirror of the trickster's cunning, a spark of chaos walking among the living. You carry the power to undo what little remains of order in this world, or to restore it." A chill ran down Eirik's spine. He had known this confrontation would come, yet nothing could have prepared him for the weight of Thor's presence. The hammer seemed to hum with judgment, the very air crackling with unspent storms. "Why do you hesitate?" Thor demanded. "Do you not know your own blood?" Eirik's hands clenched. He could feel the power inside him pulsing, shadows at the edge of his consciousness, whispers of fire and ice. "I know my blood," he said softly. "But I choose my own path." Thor studied him, silence stretching like a frozen river. Then he spoke, voice low, "Your father was cunning. Clever beyond measure. And dangerous. But perhaps there is hope for his child. Perhaps you will prove that blood does not dictate destiny." The moment was broken by a sudden tremor. The ruins of Asgard shivered, stones grinding against stones, a deep growl rising from beneath the city. Eirik instinctively raised his hands, shadows responding to his fear and will. "What? What is that?" he asked. Thor's eyes narrowed. "The remnants of Muspelheim stir. Surtur's children awaken. And they hunger for vengeance against all that remains." Eirik felt the cold fire of his power ignite within him. He had learned to control it, to mold shadows into weapons and barriers. Yet here, facing gods and monsters alike, it felt small, fragile. And still, it was all he had. The first of the creatures emerged, massive beings of molten stone and fire. Eyes like coals, breath like smoke and embers. They moved as if the world itself trembled at their steps. Eirik's stomach twisted, fear clawing at him, yet he stood firm. "I will not run," he declared. Shadows surged around him, forming shapes that struck at the advancing fireborn. Thor raised his hammer, lightning crackling around him, and together they faced the infernal tide. The battle was brutal. Fire met shadow, lightning met stone. Eirik struck with precision, learning with every move, his powers growing with the intensity of the fight. The fireborn roared and fell, yet more emerged, each stronger, each more relentless than the last. "Focus!" Thor shouted over the cacophony. "You have the gift of the trickster. Use it to outsmart them, not just strike." Eirik nodded, his mind racing. He wove illusions from shadows, creating multiple images of himself to confuse the creatures. He shaped barriers of darkness, redirecting streams of fire and molten rock away from Thor. Slowly, the tide began to turn, yet even as the last creature fell, a deeper, darker presence pressed against the ruins, the echo of an old prophecy, a shadow that whispered in the corners of the mind. Eirik could hear Loki's voice faintly, not in words, but in intent. The trickster's son was always meant to face impossible choices, and this was only the beginning. "You are learning," Thor said, his voice heavy with pride and caution. "But remember, power without wisdom is a blade that cuts its wielder first. Do not be your father's shadow. Be your own." Eirik inhaled, the ruins of Asgard around him shaking with the remnants of battle. And nodded. He could feel the weight of expectation, prophecy, and destiny pressing against him. Yet for the first time, he believed in his own agency. He would survive. He would choose. The northern wind carried whispers of the next challenge, the frozen lands of Nibelheim, the lessons of Jormungandr, and the ever-watchful gaze of gods who remembered Loki's treachery. Eirik's journey was far from over, but he stepped forward with resolve, shadows flickering around him like silent companions. As Eirik departed the ruins, the echoes of battle faded into silence. But the shadows that followed him seemed to linger longer, whispering secrets of the past and warnings of the future. Thor watched him go, knowing that this boy, though young, would shape the balance of the realms in ways neither god nor giant could fully predict. Beyond the horizon, a storm gathered. Not of clouds, but of forces unseen, lingering magic, ancient grudges, and the inevitable reckoning that awaited all who walked the path of gods and monsters alike. Eirik felt it in his bones, a trembling anticipation of trials yet to come. "I will not fail," he whispered again, the words carrying over the frozen plains. Into the dark forests, and across the silent fjords. "I am not my father. I am me." Even as he spoke, shadows moved with a mind of their own, coiling around him protectively. The boy who had fled Midgard, hunted and alone, now strode into the world with purpose, aware of the power and peril within him. The remnants of Asgard lay behind him, a memory of both loss and survival, while the path forward wound into darkness, frost, and the unseen eyes of enemies and allies alike. And somewhere, deep within the unseen realms, the echoes of Loki's laughter lingered, not mockery, but challenge, urging his son onward into destiny. The wind that swept across Nibelheim was no ordinary breeze. It was a wind heavy with frostbite and shadow, sharp enough to cut skin, carrying whispers of the dead and echoes of the damned. Eirik pressed forward, his cloak wrapped tightly around him, boots crunching across brittle ice and jagged stone. The landscape was otherworldly, black ice formations jutted from the frozen ground like the spines of some colossal creature, and fog swirled in unnerving patterns, as if it were alive. He paused for a moment, feeling the pulse of magic beneath his feet. Something stirred far below the frozen crust, a warmth that contradicted the biting cold. Shadows at the edge of his consciousness twitched, warning him that Nibelheim was more than a land of ice. It was a prison of fire and fury hidden beneath layers of frost. It sleeps. But it waits, he murmured, half to himself, half to the unseen forces that listened. He followed the subtle vibrations beneath the ice, moving cautiously toward a fissure that split the land like an open wound. Steam hissed from the cracks, carrying with it a scent of sulfur and molten rock. Eirik knew instinctively that he was close to something primordial, something older than the gods themselves. Suddenly, the ice shifted. The ground trembled, and a roar erupted from the depths. From the fissure, molten fire burst forth, crackling like living veins of magma, sending a wave of heat and light into the frigid air. Shadows surged around Eirik, responding instinctively, twisting into protective shapes. This is it, he whispered, heart pounding. The fire coalesced into forms, creatures forged of flame and fury, their bodies writhing with raw energy. Their eyes glowed with intelligence, their movements deliberate. Eirik could sense their hunger, their awareness. They were guardians of Nibelheim's hidden core, ancient entities left behind when the realms were first shaped. This is it, he whispered, heart pounding. The fire coalesced into forms, creatures forged of flame and fury, their bodies writhing with raw energy. Their eyes glowed with intelligence, their movements deliberate. Eirik could sense their hunger, their awareness. They were guardians of Nibelheim's hidden core, ancient entities left behind when the realms were first shaped. Show yourselves, he commanded, shadows rising like tendrils, encircling him protectively. The fireborn paused, assessing him. One stepped forward, taller than the rest, molten rock dripping from its jagged frame. Its voice, when it came, was like thunder rolling across a mountain valley. Child of Loki, why do you disturb the depths? Eirik steadied himself. I seek understanding, power, and the truth of my destiny. The creature's molten form shimmered with heat. The trickster's blood carries both chaos and cunning. Few who bear it have dared to walk this path. Fewer still have survived. The shadows surrounding Eirik coiled tighter, forming blades and barriers, responding to his thoughts. He felt the surge of adrenaline and power, a thrill mingled with fear. He was no longer the boy hiding in Midgard's forests, he was a force to be reckoned with, but he had yet to understand the full extent of his capabilities. Prove yourself, the molten guardian growled, advancing. Eirik's heart pounded as he leapt into action. Shadows shot forward, striking the creature with precision, only to have fire erupt and counter their assault. The battle was a dance of elements, shadow against flame, intelligence against brute power. Eirik shifted constantly, learning with each encounter, shaping his magic to anticipate the guardian's movements. As he fought, visions flashed across his mind: Jormungandr's golden eyes, Thor's hammer, Hel's whispers, and his father Loki's laughter. Each image fueled him, reminding him of the stakes. He was not merely surviving, he was learning, becoming, shaping himself into something that could challenge gods and monsters alike. After what felt like hours, the largest of the fireborn collapsed, extinguishing into molten streams that seeped back into the fissures. Eirik stood panting, shadows flickering around him, sensing the silence that followed the storm. Yet the ground trembled still, faintly, like a heartbeat echoing from the underworld. "It is not enough," a voice whispered from the shadows. Eirik turned, sensing movement beneath the ice. From the cracks emerged a second wave, larger and more terrifying, their forms less defined, more elemental, more chaotic. The guardians of fire were endless. "I will not falter," he muttered, focusing his mind. "I must master this. Or perish trying." The battle resumed, more intense than before. Shadows became tendrils, shields, blades, even decoys to confuse the elemental onslaught. The molten beings shrieked as they were struck, their forms flickering and splitting, yet for every one that fell, another arose. At last, a final guardian, immense and more complex than the others, emerged from the fissure. Its form shimmered with both ice and fire, as if embodying the balance of Niflheim itself. It paused, regarding him with eyes like molten sapphire. "You have endured," it rumbled. "Few mortals or demigods survive my domain. Few children of trickery have even attempted it." Eirik stepped forward, exhaustion and determination mingling in his chest. "I endure," he said firmly. "I will face what comes next. I will not be defined by my father. Nor by fear." The elemental creature inclined slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. Then, slowly, the fissure's heat receded, leaving behind a cavern of molten rock and shadowed ice. The fireborn retreated, dissolving into magma streams, as if the land itself had accepted his presence. "You are ready," the voice of the elemental murmured. "The fire beneath Niflheim recognizes your strength. But remember, child of Loki. Strength alone does not define destiny. Wisdom and choice will." Eirik nodded, his breath visible in the cold air, shadows pulsing in response to his heartbeat. He had survived the fire beneath Niflheim, but he knew this was only the beginning. Challenges lay ahead, more treacherous than molten guardians, more demanding than brute tests of power. He took a deep breath, feeling both exhaustion and exhilaration. The path through Niflheim stretched before him. Icy caverns twisting toward unknown dangers, toward revelations that would test not just his strength, but the very essence of who he was. "I will not fail," he whispered, the shadows around him flickering as if in agreement. "I will choose my path. My destiny. My own." The wind carried his words, echoing across frozen valleys and molten fissures alike, whispering to the remnants of Niflheim. A trickster's son walked their lands, neither fully mortal nor entirely divine, and the realms themselves would tremble in his wake. Shadows curled around him, leading deeper into the labyrinthine caverns of Niflheim. Faint light glimmered against walls of black ice, casting reflections that danced like spirits. The heat from the molten veins below contrasted with the frost above, creating an unnatural, stifling tension in the air. Eirik moved cautiously, senses sharp, aware that every step could awaken hidden dangers. From the darkness, whispers spoke, not in words, but in intent. He felt memories of those who had died in these lands, their despair and fury lingering, testing his courage and resolve. Shadows coiled protectively, but he knew magic alone would not be enough. Every decision he made, every strike or dodge, could decide life or death. Cleverness, not just strength, he reminded himself. That is the way. As he pressed forward, the path opened into a vast cavern, the ceiling lost in darkness. Streams of molten rock crisscrossed beneath him, bridges of ice spanning the deadly heat. He could feel the pulse of Niflheim's heart beneath him, a beating, breathing consciousness that watched, measured, and judged him. "So this is the heart," he whispered. "The core of the frozen fire." From the shadows, a new presence emerged, a being of ice and smoke, its eyes like shards of crystal. It moved silently, graceful and predatory, assessing him. "Child of Loki," it said, voice resonating in the cavern. "You tread where few dare. What do you seek? Understanding. Control. And to face whatever I must," Eirik replied, summoning his shadows into sharp tendrils, ready for action. The being studied him, then inclined its head. Then step carefully. Nibelheim tests not just power, but the heart that wields it. Fail here, and the fire beneath will consume more than flesh. Eirik exhaled, shadows trembling with anticipation, and stepped forward into the heart of the frozen inferno, ready to face the final trials of Nibelheim.